I've spent the last 50 years studying the problems of animal consciousness, but mostly on my own. When I first began in the 1960s, there was nobody to talk to about it because that kind of subject matter was not allowed. It wasn't regarded as decent by conventional science. So it's an extraordinary opportunity now, 50, 60 years later, to be at a conference here in India where everybody now regards these issues as being the most important issues in the world.
Animal consciousness.
As a result of this conference, we might prepare a larger conference next year to meet the requirements of very detailed analysis of all these controversial issues, to issue the statement, very balanced statement from different perspectives on consciousness in many animals.
We need to understand consciousness in every living form, using a variety of approaches taken from science, maybe Buddhist studies, philosophies. That is one goal I think we have. We need to be much more broader in our understanding.
There has been a lot in this conference. We had lots of fantastic talks. I learned a lot of new things about insect brains, about the behavioral capacities of bees in particular.
What this means for how we interact with our environment is the question of how our deeper understanding of animal minds creates a new understanding of ethics, of animal welfare, of how we need to protect the nature that has shaped all of these unique minds.
Obviously, the highlight has been meeting the Dalai Lama. For me, that has been a huge honor and privilege. And I'm also delighted to have had a lot of really interesting questions and comments from the Buddhist scholars that joined our meeting. That is a perspective that in my academic life I don't usually encounter, so that was very fruitful.
We as a Buddhist believe that there are consciousness not only in human beings but also other sentient beings. But we just want to know what the scientists are saying, what's the level of understanding in science about consciousness.
The interaction with the Buddhist monks for me was very important. Their way of thinking about consciousness and their way of controlling their own consciousness in ways that we cannot do is telling us general things about human consciousness, but it also has some implications for animal consciousness, in my opinion.
Their thinking on these issues is very deep. There's an extraordinary intelligence which they bring to the study of these issues, and a warmth and open generosity, which is quite rare. Scientists are not always like that. I think the monks could teach us a lot about how to relate to other academics.
We Buddhism, we have our own explanations. And if we look at the behavior psychologists and scientists, they also have their own way of giving the explanation regarding the mind and consciousness. And if you look at the philosopher, Western philosopher, and I came to know that they have their own way of giving an explanation on the topic of mind and consciousness. So I felt that there is a big gap between us. This is a very good way that now we can fill up this big gap,
Yes. That's very true.
Yes. Is the person dead or alive?
Still alive.
Not like Schrödinger's cat.
Yes. It is not issue. Yeah, it is still alive. All of the presenters, scholars have touched consciousness on a very different level and different angle, and they do have, their own sort of understanding consciousness.
We get so many different points of view about consciousness, how it works and how it may have evolved over the course of evolution. That it challenges me almost in every presentation to think outside of the box.
It'll help us, especially from the Buddhist community, to bridge the gap in terms of our understanding of sentient life and to put that in our work and practice.
Sentience is an astonishing creation. I've regarded it for a long time as being the jewel in the crown, the pinnacle of biological evolution. To assume that it's spread thinly across nature, I think is a terrible mistake. It means we don't understand quite how special it is.
not all humans are conscious alike. Not all humans exhibit same properties. So the Buddhist belief is based on the premise that all sentient beings, all sentient life has consciousness. And it's not the difference in the kind of consciousness, but perhaps in the states of consciousness, the degree of consciousness.
And so in my own research, I've been trying to discover when it begins, what drove it, why did natural selection choose to promote sentience in a certain number of animals and not in others. And it brings me to a rather unwelcome conclusion that sentience is actually a relatively recent evolutionary innovation and is probably quite restricted in the animal kingdom.
We tried to understand how to approach this question in a way that can be meaningful, that can actually deliver something about a very fundamental question, the first emergence of something like consciousness, the ability to feel, to smell, to perceive this picture in front of me. And we thought that the question about the origin of life has some very similar problems to the question of the origin of consciousness.
Partly just out of curiosity. We want to be able to lift the veil and see what's going on beneath the surface of appearances. But also there's a much more serious issue. We want to know what our moral obligations are, how we should treat the rest animals in nature outside of the human race. And for that, we need to know the truth.
The same question arises for me with you. How do I know you're conscious? All I've got is your behavior. And with these animals, we find out in a remarkable range of situations, they behave similarly to us. And I think that's pretty good evidence that they're feeling on the inside something like us.
They also can generate compassion and become bodhisattvas. That's there in Buddhist scripture.
Of course, animals cannot meditate and cannot have this very high level of consciousness. But I think that the very fact that we can do this and the effects of their type of control of consciousness, which, as I say, is not only human-specific, but is specific to their particular methodology of using their own minds, is informative about the relationship between cognition and feeling in general. Between what we call cognition and what we call feeling, which in humans can be decoupled, but in animals cannot.
We can understand the level of consciousness. We can understand the notion of consciousness much broader.
Maybe we should look at the consciousness in animal differently than what we are doing right now. Instead of finding similar sort of a consciousness, maybe they have a different consciousness that we should look for.
In fact, in my research now, I'm trying to be the other species. So that science can't tell me. Philosophy can tell me. So I study monkeys. I have to understand what it is to be the monkey. Otherwise, there is no understanding.
What do you think it's like to be your favorite animal, for example? Or any animal for that matter? I mean, do you have any sense of that, perhaps?
I think that we can learn a lot of things by studying our own mind, also about the minds of animals, because we have direct access to our own minds. But I think that if we want to understand many, many things about our own minds, and also about the natural history of the mind, we have to study animals.
They see me partly as another species, but they also perhaps see me as a part of them. So in that sense, I can talk to you about them and I can protect them from you by keeping you away.
When it comes to more remote creatures, we had discussions about insects, invertebrates and the like. I am out of my depth, to be honest, and I am yet to be convinced whether they are or are not conscious. So I think it'll be difficult to establish consensus on these matters next year, which is a very ambitious task, but we can but try.
Do animals have consciousness? I'm hoping we can find out in the next conference.
I felt like that it is a good update for me, that I can go back and interact with my students. Whatever the new scientific finding, I can share to my students. Now we are coming closer to each other, and then I feel that, this kind of gap has been filled up. This is what I feel.
We will reach something closer where we both science and ancient Indian tradition, ancient Indian psychology, defining consciousness will get closer.
Yes, I've learnt things at this conference which I certainly didn't expect. Some of the information about animal behaviour is just mind-blowing. I mean, I know that animals are remarkable creatures, and I've long time studied animal intelligence, but increasingly we're getting evidence of animals having capacities which we never even imagined.
Conversation will continue while we update our measurements and update designing of new tools and frameworks for those experiments. But from a Buddhist worldview, we do believe that sentient beings are sentient and they have consciousness.
There have been so many things that have been said here, and so many points of view, and also many disagreements. We are not all agreeing about things, but this was the best conference on consciousness that I have ever attended.